Hello everyone, Siavash here. So in this video we're going to talk about variables. So in computers and programming basically, when you want to store a value, it being a character or a number or whatever, or it be a user input, input from the keyboard, input from the network card, input from a scanner, from a whatever input. You need to save that input temporarily so you can work with it. To do that, computers have memory called RAM, random access memory. So we need something called a variable to use to save a value in the memory. So basically, a variable is a box in the memory that has a name and it has an address. We don't care about the address, and it has a type and a value. So very simply, use the name that you want, say my variable for example, and then use the equal sign and then give it your value, say I don't know, 12 for example. And now I can work with this specific variable. Now this variable holds the number, the value 12 for me. Say I have another variable called result and I want to use my variable, whatever is in it, and I want to do some mathematical operations on it. Let's use something simple like this, and now I can print it. So I can say please print result. Now if I hit F5, this is gonna compile and run. So I did hit F5, and as you can see, you get 14 back. So if you remember, we used quotations when we said hello, but here we didn't. So what's all that about? When you use variable names, you do not use quotations. Quotations are for strings. So what's a string? It's a bunch of characters, or even one character. That's called a string. For example, my string equals hello you guys. So this is a string, so I put it in quotations. Now you can use single quotation or double quotation, your choice. Okay, that's your choice, but whatever you choose, stick with it. And remember, you cannot do this, use double quotation in one side and single quotation in the other. So please choose one of these and stick with it and be consistent. That's being a good programmer. Now if I wanna print my string, although it is a string, but still you saved it in a variable, and when you are using variables you do not use the quotations. Now if I run this program, it's gonna say hello you guys. Why? Because we saved that string in a variable and we called that variable, and basically we did some computations on it. Did we? Yes, we did. We printed. So printing basically is some kind of calculations for computer if you look at it technically. Anyways, so variables are a very important part of programming. You definitely need them for all sorts of stuff, and variables has types that we don't care about that, because Python doesn't care. It's gonna conclude the type itself. So it just made your job easier. For example, when you say my variable equals 12, Python says, okay, 12 is an integer, so I'm gonna make the type of this variable an integer. When you say my string equals something like this between quotations, Python says, okay, he used quotations, so this should be a string. So that's why you don't need to tell Python what type you're using. It's gonna deduce the type itself. Okay? So some other points and some tips here that you almost already know, but you just don't know that you know them. For example, obviously you cannot use strings and integers together to do some calculations, some mathematical calculations. And that's obvious, isn't it? Because it has no meaning to say 12 I don't know, 12 modular hello you guys. Okay? So try to avoid these kind of problems. Now say we have a variable called I, and I'm gonna say it's 24 on 2. Okay? We can say 2 times 2, so that's the first one is division, the second one is multiplication, and we can say k equals 2 plus 2. This is completely clear, and you got the minus. L equals 3 minus 2, and we have something called modular. O equals, say, 5 modular 2. That means divide 5 by 2 and give me the remainder. So if we divide 5 by 2, it's gonna be 2, and 2 times 2 is 4, so we have 1 remainder. So the integer 1 is going to be saved in O. So if we print O, let's hit F5, and as you can see we get 1 back. So that's how you use variables, and these are almost intuitive. You don't need I don't need to explain them too much. So just remember one thing: try to use integers with integers, not with strings. Or we have something else called floats. They call it floating point numbers, whatever you want to call them. A number like this. So it's called a float. Try not to do this, for example. Is it wrong? Is it going to be, is it not going to compile? Will you get a problem? No, no, no. Logically, it's better to divide an integer by an integer. If you want to do a float division, use something like this, so you yourself know what you're doing. So now this is a float because we gave it a floating point. This is a float because it has a floating point. Now we can clearly or explicitly know what we're doing. And 6 months later, when we are looking at our code, we're not gonna be confused. What did we do here? Let's hit F5. And as you can see, the division happened. And there is one more operator. They call these operators, but I just don't want to go and talk about the official names. So just watch and learn, that's all. You don't need to be worried about those things. So let's say x equals 4, let's say 5 a slash 2. So what's the difference between this and this? Here, let's say this is 25. Let's use something very easy. 5 divided by 2. It's going to be 2.5, right? Let's print it. As you can see, it's 2.5. If you use double the slash, it means divide it, but give me the integer part of the result. I do not want the whole number. So if we print x, we're going to get back just 2, because the floating point will go away. It's going to round it up, actually round it down. Let's hit F5, and as you can see, we get 2 back. Well, I hope this has been informative. If there's any problems or questions, please ask. Have a good, I don't know, day, night, whatever.